Welcome to Abomination Realm, the place where shadows linger and the forgotten horrors of history are dragged back into the light. Tonight, we descend into the brutal legacy of one of the most feared and controversial figures of the modern age, a man born into poverty, who clawed his way to the throne of a fractured nation, a dictator who bathed in wealth while his people starved, a master of fear who ruled through torture, war, and blood. This is the story of Saddam Hussein. From the dusty streets of Tikrit to the golden halls of power in Baghdad, from genocide and chemical warfare to war with the world and a final descent into a cold, concrete grave. This is not just a biography, it is a journey into tyranny, deception, and destruction, a tale of how power can turn a man into a myth and a nation into a nightmare. So light your candles, lock your doors, and prepare yourselves, because history is far more terrifying than fiction. Saddam Hussein was born on April 28, 1937, in the small village of Al-Auja, just outside the city of Tikrit in northern Iraq. His entry into the world was marked by tragedy and abandonment. His father either died or disappeared before he was born, and his older brother died shortly thereafter. His mother, Subhatufa al-Musallat, was devastated by grief and nearly aborted Saddam. She attempted to give him away to another family. Rejected, she sent him to live with his uncle, Khairallah Talfa, a former Iraqi army officer and ardent Arab nationalist. From this man, Saddam absorbed early seeds of ideology and vengeance. Saddam's early years were defined by hardship and violence. He grew up in a mud brick house among impoverished families with limited education and few prospects. As a child, he rarely smiled, and those who knew him described a quiet, brooding boy prone to bursts of rage. His uncle, a disciplinarian steeped in anti-British and pan-Arab sentiments, shaped Saddam's worldview. The boy learned early that power was taken, not given, that fear could be more powerful than love. At 10 years old, Saddam ran away from his abusive stepfather and rejoined his uncle in Baghdad. This was his first journey from the margins of society toward its center. In Baghdad, he enrolled in school and became politically active. He struggled with academics but was relentless in ambition. In 1957, at the age of 20, Saddam joined the Ba'ath Party, a political movement that fused Arab nationalism, socialism, and anti-imperialism. The Ba'athists dreamed of a united Arab world led by strongmen who could purge corruption, colonial influence, and Western domination. In 1959, Saddam was selected to participate in a Ba'athist plot to assassinate Iraqi Prime Minister Abd al-Karim Qasim, who had taken power a year earlier in a military coup. The ambush failed. Saddam was wounded in the leg and fled the country, first to Syria, then to Egypt. While in exile, he studied law and continued to build connections within the pan-Arab political network. The attempt marked him for life. He had drawn blood in the name of revolution and survived. He returned to Iraq in 1963 when the Ba'ath briefly seized power after a successful coup. But internal divisions within the Ba'ath Party quickly led to their ousting, and Saddam was imprisoned. He spent the next years in confinement where he read voraciously law, history, Stalinist strategy, and built a network of loyal allies. In 1967, he escaped from prison in dramatic fashion, reportedly hiding in a water tanker to flee captivity. He went underground, consolidating power within the Ba'athist ranks and preparing for a return to prominence. In 1968, the Ba'ath Party launched another coup, this time successfully, and established a long-term grip on Iraq. Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, Saddam's relative and mentor, became president. But Saddam was the real force behind the curtain. He controlled the intelligence apparatus, internal security, and party organization. Through assassinations, surveillance, and torture, he neutralized rivals and built a vast system of loyalty and fear. Over the next decade, Saddam expanded his power. He oversaw massive industrialization, education reform, and economic growth fueled by Iraq's oil wealth. He negotiated oil nationalization, brought literacy campaigns to rural areas, and modernized infrastructure. These achievements, however, were used as tools of control. Every advancement was tied to Ba'athist propaganda, every success to the glory of Saddam Hussein. In July 1979, al-Bakr resigned under pressure and Saddam assumed the presidency. Almost immediately, he convened an emergency meeting of Ba'ath party leaders. In a televised session, Saddam read a list of names, accusing them of treason and plotting a coup. Men were dragged out screaming. Some were forced to execute their fellow party members to prove loyalty. This purge solidified Saddam's grip on the state. The age of the dictator had begun. Saddam cultivated a godlike image. Statues were erected across cities. His portraits were painted in schools, mosques, and public squares. He wore Western suits one day and traditional Bedouin robes the next, presenting himself as both modernizer and tribal chief. School children chanted his name. The media became an instrument of his mythology. But Saddam was not content with ruling Iraq alone. He wanted to lead the Arab world. In 1980, he invaded neighboring Iran, hoping to seize territory and assert dominance over a post-revolutionary, chaotic Islamic republic. He believed the West and much of the Arab world would support him. The Iran-Iraq War became one of the longest and most brutal conflicts of the 20th century. It lasted 8 years. The front lines were static and bloody, reminiscent of World War I. Iraq used chemical weapons, including mustard gas and nerve agents, against Iranian troops and, in some cases, civilians. International condemnation was muted. The West, particularly the United States and France, provided Iraq with intelligence and support, fearing the rise of Iran's Islamic Revolution more than Saddam's brutality. In 1988, Saddam turned those same weapons on his own people. During the Anfal campaign against the Kurds in northern Iraq, Iraqi forces destroyed thousands of villages, displaced hundreds of thousands, and used chemical weapons in acts of terror. The most infamous was the massacre at Halabja, where an estimated 5,000 civilians, mostly women and children, died in a single chemical attack. Thousands more were injured or sickened. The world watched, issued statements, and moved on. Flush with a sense of impunity, Saddam turned his attention south. In August 1990, he invaded Kuwait, claiming it as Iraqi territory and accusing the small nation of overproducing oil and stealing from Iraqi reserves. The global response was swift. The United Nations condemned the invasion. The United States, under President George H.W. Bush, assembled a coalition and launched Operation Desert Storm in early 1991. The war was short, but devastating. Coalition forces bombarded Iraq's military infrastructure, destroying roads, bridges, and communication systems. In just over a month, Iraqi forces were driven out of Kuwait. However, coalition troops stopped short of removing Saddam from power. The dictator remained, battered but alive. What followed was a decade of pain. Uprisings in southern and northern Iraq were crushed with savage force. The Shia and Kurdish populations were again subjected to mass killings. The West imposed punishing economic sanctions. Iraq's middle class collapsed. Hospitals ran out of medicine. Children died of malnutrition. While his people suffered, Saddam built new palaces, filled them with gold, and maintained his cult of personality. He continued to defy UN weapons inspectors, leading to ongoing suspicion about weapons of mass destruction. In 2003, the United States, under President George W. Bush, launched a second invasion of Iraq. Citing the threat of Saddam's supposed weapons programs and links to terrorism, American forces swept into the country. Baghdad fell within weeks. Statues of Saddam were toppled. His regime crumbled, but Saddam himself was gone. For 9 months, Saddam remained a fugitive. He moved from safe house to safe house, relying on a shrinking circle of loyalists. On December 13, 2003, U.S. forces found him hiding in a camouflaged underground hideout near Tikrit. He was unkempt, bearded, and armed with a pistol he never fired. Saddam was placed on trial by the newly formed Iraqi government. The trial focused primarily on the Dujail massacre, in which 148 Shia men and boys were executed after a failed assassination attempt on Saddam's motorcade. The trial was criticized for its irregularities, but it concluded with a guilty verdict. On December 30, 2006, Saddam Hussein was hanged. The execution was filmed on a cell phone and leaked to the public. It showed guards taunting him moments before the trapdoor fell. The dictator died with a defiant sneer on his face, but his death did not bring the closure many had hoped for. Iraq descended into chaos. The disbanding of the Iraqi military and purge of Ba'athist officials left a vacuum that would give rise to violent insurgency. Many former regime loyalists would eventually join or lead what would become the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS. Saddam's palaces remain, many looted or in ruins. His face no longer adorns the walls, but his legacy is etched in the blood of a nation. His life was a paradox of progress and destruction, order and savagery. To some, he was a strong man who held a fractured country together. To others, he was a tyrant who turned Iraq into a graveyard of dreams. He ruled through fear. He silenced millions with death. And though his body now lies in a tomb in his home village, the damage he wrought continues to ripple through history. Saddam Hussein did not simply rise and fall. He exploded across the 20th century like a sandstorm of steel and shadow, leaving behind a legacy too dark to forget.